The fluorescent lights in courtroom 7 had a flicker that nobody ever fixed. It happened every 40 seconds or so, a brief stutter of light that made the room feel less certain than it already was. On the morning of November the 3rd, Vincent Hale noticed it from where he stood near the back wall, mop handle resting against his shoulder, watching a woman he had never met prepare to lose everything. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be in the East Corridor, finishing the baseboards before the 9 o'clock docket. But something had stopped him at the doorway. A sound, maybe, or the particular stillness of a room where everyone was waiting for something bad to happen. The woman at the defendant's table sat with her spine very straight, the way people sit when they are trying not to fall apart in public. She had dark hair pulled back simply, no jewelry, a gray blazer that looked like it had been chosen carefully for the occasion. In front of her sat a leather folder, closed. Beside her, the chair where her legal counsel was supposed to be seated remained empty. It was 8:53 in the morning. 3 months earlier, Vincent had been the overnight custodian at the Whitmore Tower on King Street West, a 43-story glass building that housed, among other things, the Canadian headquarters of Arcturus Energy Solutions. He had worked the building for 11 years. He knew which elevators were slow, which floor the motion sensors were temperamental, which partners stayed past midnight, and which ones left at 4:30 and pretended they hadn't. He knew the building the way you only know a place when no one is watching you watch it. What the building did not know about Vincent Hale was considerably more significant. He was 58 years old. His hair had gone the color of old pewter sometime in his early 50s, and he wore it short, parted, on the left the way his mother had insisted when he was 7, and the habit had simply never left. He drove a 2009 Civic with a crack in the passenger side mirror and a cardboard pine tree air freshener that had stopped smelling like anything 2 winters ago. He owned 3 pairs of the same work trousers in navy blue. He ate his lunch, always a thermos of soup and crackers in a Ziploc bag. On the same bench on the loading dock, weather permitting, looking out at the delivery lane and the concrete retaining wall beyond it, he had a daughter named Lena. She was 24 and studying environmental law at Osgood. She called him every Sunday at 7, and he always picked up on the second ring, not the first, because his late wife, Sylvie, had once told him that picking up on the first ring made you seem like you had nothing else going on. He had laughed at that. He still followed the rule. Sylvie had been dead for 9 years. Breast cancer, caught late, gone fast. The speed of it had been a cruelty he had never fully made his peace with. What the building, and almost everyone in it, did not know was that before Vincent Hale had ever touched a mop, he had spent 18 years as a forensic accountant with a practice that had, at various points, advised the Federal Department of Finance, 3 provincial securities commissions, and a significant number of corporate defendants who had very much needed someone who could find the numbers that other people had worked very hard to hide. He had been, in the language of the profession, exceptionally good. He had stopped practicing the year Sylvie was diagnosed. He had made that decision quietly, without announcing it, and had never once been tempted to reverse it. He had taken the custodial position because it paid reliably. It left him time for Lena. It let him think. And because he had discovered, to his own mild surprise, that he did not miss being important. He missed Sylvie. He missed the shape of a life that had included her. Everything else could be arranged around whatever was left. He was not a man who spoke unnecessarily. His supervisor, a cheerful Newfoundlander named Bertrand, who managed the building's maintenance crew, had once told a new hire that Vincent Hale was the most competent person in the building, and also probably the quietest, and that these 2 things were not unrelated. The woman whose chair sat empty that morning in courtroom 7 was Margot Ellery. She was 41 years old, the founder and controlling shareholder of Ellery Renewable Systems, a Halifax-based company she had built from a single patent on tidal energy conversion technology into a firm now valued on paper at somewhere north of $400 million. The technology worked. That was the thing the industry had never quite been able to accept. It worked reliably, at scale, and at a cost per kilowatt that made certain very large and very established interests extremely uncomfortable. The charges against her were securities fraud. The Crown alleged she had knowingly misrepresented the stage of development of her proprietary grid integration software to investors in a Series C round, inducing $17 million in capital on false pretenses. If convicted, she faced up to 14 years. The charges were, as Margot understood it entirely, and as her previous legal team had apparently ceased to care about entirely, fabricated. She had known something was wrong 6 weeks earlier, when her lead counsel, a Bay Street senior partner named Leonard, who charged $480 an hour and had a painting of a sailboat behind his desk, had begun returning her calls with increasing delay. Then the delays became silences. Then, at 8:17 on the morning of her trial, she had received a one-line email informing her that the firm was withdrawing from her representation due to an unspecified conflict of interest that had come to their attention. She had read the email 3 times in the back of a taxi on the way to the courthouse. Then she had put her phone face down in her lap and looked out the window at the October Street. And she had not cried, because she had learned a long time ago that crying in the back of taxis led nowhere useful. What she had felt instead was something colder and more specific. The recognition that someone had gotten to Leonard. And that whoever had gotten to Leonard had the kind of reach that left you alone in a courtroom with an empty chair beside you, and 11 years of your life about to come undone. Vincent had turned to leave the doorway when the judge entered. Protocol kept him still. He stood with his mop and his supply cart just outside the threshold and watched the room settle into its formal arrangement. And it was then, in that pause between the bailiff's announcement and the judge's first words, that he saw Margot Ellery turn and look at the empty chair beside her with an expression that was not despair exactly, but something adjacent to it, something he recognized. It was the expression of a person doing very precise arithmetic about very bad odds and arriving at a number they already knew. He had seen that expression once before, in a hospital room on the 4th floor of Mount Sinai 9 years ago. Sylvie, doing the same arithmetic, arriving at the same number. He didn't make decisions consciously after that. Later, he would not be able to explain it in any way that satisfied people who wanted a tidy rationale, and he would stop trying. He simply set his mop against the wall, squared the cart to one side so it wouldn't obstruct the corridor, adjusted the collar of his work shirt, and walked into courtroom 7. "Excuse me," he said it quietly, to the clerk nearest the door. She looked at him, at his navy work trousers, his rubber-soled shoes, the embroidered logo of the building services company on his chest, with the particular expression that people used when they were trying to be polite about something they found confusing. "The defendant," Vincent said. "Is she currently unrepresented?" The clerk looked toward the table where Margot Ellery sat alone. "Her counsel has. There's been a withdrawal. The judge is about to address it. Then I'd like to be heard." The next 4 minutes were the most formally chaotic in the clerk's recent memory. The judge, a silver-haired woman named the Honorable Patricia something, whose nameplate Vincent didn't catch, looked at him over her reading glasses with an expression that communicated both professional composure and genuine bewilderment. "And you are?" "Vincent Hale. I was formerly a licensed forensic accountant and financial analyst with the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. I held my certification for 18 years. I am aware that my license has lapsed. I am also aware that this court has discretion to permit unlicensed lay representation in exceptional circumstances. I would submit that an abandoned defendant on the morning of trial constitutes exceptional circumstances." A silence settled over the room. "Mr. Hale," the judge said carefully, "do you know this woman?" "No, Your Honor." "Have you reviewed any of the case materials?" "No, Your Honor. I would require time to do so." The judge looked at the Crown prosecutor, a compact man in a well-pressed suit who was looking at Vincent with the expression of someone who had encountered a novel species. Then she looked at Margot Ellery, whose face had arranged itself into something careful and unreadable. "Mrs. Ellery," the judge said, "do you consent to this individual acting in an advisory capacity while the court considers how to proceed?" Margot looked at Vincent Hale for a long moment. His shoes were wrong for a courtroom. His shirt had a small scuff of cleaning product near the left cuff that he hadn't noticed. He stood in front of a judge with the absolute stillness of a man who was not remotely afraid of what happened next. "Yes," she said. "I consent." The judge adjourned until the following morning. Vincent drove home, fed his neighbor's cat, who had been looking at him accusatorially through the window for 3 days, made a pot of coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table with the trial documents that Margot's assistant had emailed to him by 4 in the afternoon. He read for 11 hours. He was not, at this point, thinking about Sylvie or about Lena or about why he had walked into that courtroom. He was thinking about a set of numbers that did not behave the way numbers should when they were real. He had been reading financial statements for most of his adult life, and falsified ones had a particular quality, a smoothness, an absence of the small irregularities that real transactions accumulated naturally, like dust. The documents in the Ellery case were very smooth in certain places and very rough in others. And the roughness was not where the Crown said the problems were. By 2 in the morning, he had found the first thread. It was in the investor communications, in a series of email attachments that the Crown had included as evidence of Margot's alleged misrepresentations. 3 of the attachments had metadata that placed their creation date 8 days after the date printed in the document header. Someone had backdated them. Someone had created documents designed to look like Margot had sent misleading projections in advance of the Series C close, when in fact those documents had not existed until after the round was completed, and Vincent checked this twice, after a competitor firm, Custodian Grid Technologies, had quietly begun acquiring Ellery Renewables minority shareholders. He put his coffee cup down. He pulled up the corporate registry. He cross-referenced the shareholder acquisition filings. He found the name of the numbered company that had been accumulating Ellery shares through an intermediary, and then he found the name of the individual who was the sole director of that numbered company, and that name was the same name as the managing partner of the law firm that had represented Leonard. Leonard had not been bribed to withdraw. Leonard had been directed to withdraw, because Leonard's firm had a financial interest in Margot Ellery being convicted, in her company destabilizing, and in her shares becoming available at distressed prices. Vincent sat back in his chair. Outside, a streetcar made its sound on the tracks, the distinctive metal complaint of it carrying through the quiet neighborhood. He thought about a woman sitting very straight in a gray blazer, doing arithmetic about bad odds. He wrote a summary of his findings in plain, precise language, the kind he had once written for securities regulators who needed to understand complex fraud quickly. Then he printed it, made a second coffee, and waited for it to be a reasonable hour to call her. Margot answered on the second ring. She had not slept. She was at her kitchen table in Halifax. She'd taken the first flight back after the adjournment, with a mug of tea and the weight of something she couldn't yet name pressing on the space behind her sternum. She had spent the evening trying to think of anyone she trusted enough to call, and the list had come up shorter than she'd expected, which had told her something about the last decade of her life that she was not ready to fully examine. When Vincent said quietly that he had found something significant, she did not immediately respond. "How significant?" she said finally. "The kind," he said, "that changes the direction of the case. I want to be precise about what I know and what I can establish, and I want you to understand what I can and can't do in that courtroom. I'm not a lawyer. I can help you understand the financial evidence. I can prepare questions. I can help you spot what the Crown is likely to obscure, but you'll need actual counsel for the legal procedures. My lawyer withdrew because his firm has a financial interest in my conviction." "I know," Vincent said. "I found that too." Another pause. "Who are you?" Margot said, not rudely, with genuine curiosity, the kind that comes when a thing is simply more than you had room for. "I used to be a forensic accountant," he said. "Now I clean buildings. Why? My wife got sick. I made different choices." A pause. It was the right call. She heard something in that, not self-pity, not its absence either, but something more seasoned. The way a person speaks about something that has been fully absorbed rather than merely survived. "Okay," she said. "Tell me what you found." In the corridor outside courtroom 7, 20 minutes before the trial resumed, a junior partner from a different firm, one Margot had reached at 7 in the morning through a law school contact, reviewed Vincent's summary with the rapid focus of someone who recognized the shape of something serious. "This is good," she said, almost to herself. She was young, maybe 32, with an organized mind and the particular energy of someone who had been handed an interesting problem. "This is really good, if the metadata holds up under forensic examination." "It will," Vincent said. She looked at him. "You're certain? The creation timestamps are embedded in the file properties. They didn't alter those. They altered the header date in the document content. It's a basic error. Common in white-collar fraud cases. People focus on the visible and forget the invisible. She nodded slowly. We'd need an expert to testify. I can give you 3 names, former colleagues. Any of them can turn this around in 24 hours. She looked at him for a moment, at the pressed but clearly old Navy trousers, the careful way he held himself, the absolute economy of his words. And she had the same experience that several people would have over the following days, the sense of someone who had chosen smallness deliberately, and for reasons that were not small at all. "All right," she said. "Let's go in." The next 2 days moved the way consequential things sometimes move, both faster and slower than expected, with moments that stopped time and stretches that dissolved it. The Crown's expert, a financial analyst who had been retained to explain the investor communications to the jury, had not been told about the metadata. He discovered this on the stand, under questioning structured by Vincent and delivered by the junior partner, with a precision that was almost courteous in its devastation. The analyst's composure held for 3 questions. By the 4th, he had asked for a moment to review the documents again, which in a courtroom is rarely a good sign for the person asking. The judge called a recess. During that recess, in the hallway on the 3rd floor where the vending machines hummed and the light came in flat through frosted glass, Margot sat beside Vincent on a bench and said nothing for almost 3 minutes. He didn't try to fill it. He had brought a thermos of coffee and he poured her half without being asked, and she took it with both hands the way you take warmth when you've been cold for a while. "My father built boats," she said eventually. "Small ones. Lake boats. He used to say that the difference between a boat that floats and one that doesn't isn't the big things. It's always the small things. The seal you almost didn't check. The fastener that looked fine." Vincent didn't say anything. "I built this company," she said, "on technology that I spent 8 years proving to people wasn't a gimmick. 8 years. And someone decided that was inconvenient." She looked at her coffee. "I'm not naive about how things work. I just didn't think." She stopped. "I didn't think it would be this direct." "It usually isn't this direct," Vincent said. "When it is, it means they were confident they could make it work. They weren't wrong to be confident. They made one technical error. You found it at 2 in the morning. I've been looking at documents like those for a long time." She looked at him then, sideways, careful. "Why are you doing this?" He thought about it honestly, the way he tried to think about most things. "You were sitting in that room doing the arithmetic," he said. "I recognized the look." She didn't ask him to explain that. Some things don't need explanation. They just need someone to have said them out loud. The verdict came on the 4th day. Not guilty on all counts. The courtroom's reaction was not the dramatic eruption that stories sometimes require. It was quieter than that. A collective exhale, like a building settling. Margot sat very still for a moment, then nodded once, the way you nod when something happens that you had been afraid to let yourself expect. Her new counsel put a hand briefly on her arm. The jury filed out. The Crown prosecutor gathered his documents with the flat attention of a professional absorbing a professional reversal. Vincent was at the back of the room again, where he had been for most of the proceedings. He hadn't been necessary today. He had been necessary 3 days ago at 2 in the morning, at a kitchen table in a house in Roncesvalles with a pot of coffee, and 11 hours and 18 years of knowing exactly what wrong numbers look like. He left before Margot finished speaking with her counsel. He had his shift that evening. The East Corridor baseboards were still unfinished. She found him 3 days later. She had asked the court clerk, who had asked building services, who had eventually directed her to the overnight custodian, currently assigned to the Whitmore Tower. She came at 11:30 at night, which was the kind of time that announces that something matters. She was in jeans and a field jacket, no blazer, her hair down, and she looked like a different version of the woman from the courtroom. Younger, somehow, or maybe just less armored. Vincent was wiping down the elevator doors in the lobby when she came through the main entrance. He stopped and looked at her without surprise. "You left," she said. "You had what you needed." "I wanted to." She paused, found the right word. "Thank you." Properly. "You've thanked me," in a text message. It was a good text message, he said. She smiled then for the first time he had seen. It changed her face in a way that was interesting, not softening it exactly, but making it more specific. She had come, she said, with a proposal. She had been thinking about the months before her trial, about how close she had come, about how it had only been chance that had placed a man with particular skills outside a particular courtroom door on a particular morning. She had been thinking about other people who hadn't had that chance, people without capital, without connections, without anyone who happened to recognize that the numbers were wrong. She wanted to fund something, a service, initially small, maybe just a handful of people, that could provide forensic financial review for individuals who had been charged with financial crimes and lacked the resources to mount adequate defenses. She had spoken to 2 lawyers who were interested. She needed someone to run the analytical side. She needed someone who knew what she now knew this man could do. Vincent listened to all of this. Then he looked back at the elevator door he had been cleaning, as if considering it. "I'd need to keep my evenings," he said. "My daughter calls Sunday at 7. "You can keep whatever you like," Margot said. "And I'm not interested in an office with my name on it." Understood. He was quiet for a moment. In the lobby, the building settled around them. The hum of the HVAC, the distant sound of a streetcar, the particular quality of a city at night when it's between its day self and its morning self. "What would you call it?" he said. She had thought about this. "The Hale Review, after you." He shook his head. "Call it something else." "After your wife, then," she said. He looked at her. She hadn't known about Sylvie. "And yet, how did you? You said different choices. You said it was the right call." She held his gaze steadily. "It was a guess, but I think it was a good one." He was quiet for a long time. The elevator doors behind him were very clean. "The Sylvie Review," he said finally, not quite to her, testing the sound of it in the lobby's particular silence. Then, "All right." On a Tuesday morning the following February, in a third-floor office above a Vietnamese restaurant on Bloor Street, a small staff of 4, 2 analysts, a paralegal, and an office coordinator named June who ran things with alarming efficiency, opened the doors of a service that would, over the following years, review financial evidence in 112 cases, identify meaningful irregularities in 79 of them, and contribute to the acquittal or charge reduction of 61 individuals who would otherwise have had no way of knowing that the documents used against them had been built to look like something they were not. Vincent Hale attended the opening morning. He brought a thermos of soup. He looked at the small sign June had mounted by the door, clean sans serif letters, nothing elaborate, and he stood with his hands in his jacket pockets for a moment, looking at it. Lena had come down from Toronto for it. She stood beside him, taller than he remembered from childhood, with her mother's way of standing when something mattered, weight back, arms crossed, chin slightly lifted. "She would have liked this," Lena said. "She would have had opinions about the sign," Vincent said. Lena laughed. It was very much like her mother's laugh, sudden and complete. He put his arm around her once, briefly, the way fathers do with adult children when they don't want to make too much of something. Then he went inside, because there was work to do, and he had always been, above all things, a man who showed up for it.